Good afternoon. This is Sean Meissner with I'm one of the coaches at Sharman Ultra Coaching, and this is my seventh year in a row doing a Facebook Live Q&A around the holidays to answer all of your running running related questions. They can be ultra or non-ultra, just running in general, and any, any question in general if you want to ask me. They may not be running related, but I can try and answer them as I'm sure usually a few fun friends try and throw some uh, sidearms my way and make me think. Um, but what we got going on tonight is, or this afternoon, this will be anywhere from like 45-ish minutes or so, and a few people have already asked me questions in advance, and I encourage you to please write some of your own questions in the comments, and as they come through, I will try and get to them. A little bit about myself. I have been a runner for a little over 40 years. My first race was in May of 1983. And I've been running ultras for 22 and a half years. I've run 205 ultra marathons now. Got 200 in 20 years, and then I haven't run many of the last 2.5 years. I've been doing a lot more biking and shorter running, which is fun too. You don't always have to run ultras. So that's just a little bit of my background on running. As far as coaching, I have been a coach since 2001. I kind of got into it just randomly through via high school cross country. I was a volunteer assistant for Sisters High School cross country, and that just eventually morphed into me coaching some friends, and then morphed into me coaching some people to get paid. And that's my main gig now, and I love it. See other We will also be doing some other Facebook Live sessions with other coaches in the next couple weeks, maybe a month or so. And tomorrow at the same time, Annie Hughes will be doing the same thing as I am, just with the Annie flair, where I have the Sean flair. So if you want to tune in to her tomorrow to get her um, listen to her feedback. She'll probably give a lot of good stuff on 200 milers. That's her cup of tea. Then please ask. And anyway, so some people have already sent some questions through to me, so I will begin there. And please, yeah, I see Ian just put a comment in. Please throw questions my way while we're going in this. But the first one is from long-time listener. I think Dean has asked me questions every single year I've done this. So thank you, Dean, for tuning in again and asking questions. I appreciate that. Dean, he says, I have a client. So apparently Dean's a fellow coach. He has a client that got into hard rock. The client lives at 3,000 feet, and nearby mountains are 90 minutes away and only go up to about 7,000 feet. What can they do to prepare for altitude? They have completed UTMB, Fat Dog, Bighorn. Would most of the running at Hard Rock be just on the downhills? That's a great question, Dean. And just in general, most people that run Hard Rock don't live at high altitude. That's just math tells us that most people live near sea level, and most people that run Hard Rock live near sea level, and that's just the way it goes. And your client being able to get up to 7,000 feet is a lot higher than most people can get when they're training for Hard Rock. And even your client's sea level at 3,000 feet is much higher than most people live for training for Hard Rock. So I'd say your client is up a little bit, except for obviously compared to the Silverton locals and Leadville locals and whatnot. But I mean, the best thing as far as they can do in general is just get up, just be fit. That's the best thing you can do for, I mean, any race in general, but specifically for something like Hard Rock, be fit. There is a little bit of a crossover with higher red blood cell count and training and heat. So if they live somewhere lower and it's hot, or they can get in the sauna, that will also help make some more red blood cells, and that's kind of the same thing that altitude will do. It's not going to be an exact one-to-one there, but it'll be better than nothing. And just running in the heat will make them suffer, and they will be suffering as they go up handies. So just that suffering part of it is never a bad thing. to get more comfortable with, and they'll be suffering more than just when they're going up the handies. They'll probably be suffering every time they go above 12,000 feet, definitely, but even above 10,000 feet probably. Um, I found though a lot of times that hard rock people, it is around around tree line where people get, that's where they really start suffering, and that's around 10 or 11.5, so almost that 12,000 foot range. And then hills, whether that's on their local hilly trails, just on daily runs, just to get fitter, get stronger on the trails. It could be hill repeats, longer hill repeats, specifically for hard rock, long hilly runs. You can throw in hill repeats on the longer runs, but what would probably be more beneficial is hilly hikes for part of that long run. And with the weighted vest could be good. It could be a weighted vest, or it could just be their regular running pack, just with more things in it. Usually when I have clients do that, I just tell them to put a bunch of water in it, because then at the very least, if they get thirsty, they can drink the water. And I mean, you can make a pack be 15, 20 pounds with just water, and if it's that heavy during the race, you're probably doing something wrong. Especially for hard rock, since there's no mandatory kit. But as far as when they will be running, hopefully they'll be running on the downhills. Uphills, there's no need to even try. It's futile. And there are a few flat sections when they go through towns. Going through Ouray and Telluride are both, well, Telluride doesn't have much flat, but Ouray, there's some flat running through Ouray. But I have no idea which way the race goes in 2024. If they get up the ladders, down the chutes, then there will be a lot of running down just down the nice long road sections. They come down Camp Bird Road and towards the base of Handies. But I don't know which way it goes this year, since I no longer live in Durango. I'm sad to say I don't go there every year anymore, so I just forgot which way they go each year. If someone out there can tell me, that'd be great. But yeah, they should get comfortable, or anyone running hard rock, get comfortable with being a good hiker. Just go on some good hikes. Because one thing we talk about a lot in the Sharman Ultra coaching, in the longer the race is, where there's more hiking, it's a big thing isn't how fast your fastest speed is, it's how fast your slowest speed is. Meaning, be a good hiker. Be efficient at hiking. When you start hiking, when you go from run to a hike, don't just start walking, hike with purpose. And obviously at 13,000 feet, that's going to be harder. But still, you can still kind of hike with purpose. It's going to be slower than at 4,000 feet, but you can still hike with purpose. And practicing that in training is what's going to help with that. So yeah, that's it. Thanks, Dean, for that question. Let's see if anyone else. Let me see. Dean, any tips they get into altitude-related illnesses during the race? If it's something really bad, then like HAPE or HACE, where they get fluid in their lungs or in the brain, they have to go down in altitude. That's a non-negotiable. And there are usually, if not medics there are medics at the big aid stations at Hard Rock, but even at the smaller aid stations, there are Hard Rock vets that can usually tell if someone is seriously in jeopardy of hurting themselves, and they will tell that. They have the authority then to pull that person and hopefully try and put them in a car and get them down from altitude as quick as possible. Those don't happen often at Hard Rock. Usually someone's pain receptors go off long before they hit those, and their self-governor will make them go slower. But sometimes it can happen. And if they're just feeling bad, there's a difference between feeling bad and being seriously, fluid in your lungs or in your brain. And that's just part of Hard Rock. It's just feeling bad. You're not going to feel awesome at 13,000 feet. That's just kind of the way it goes. And you got to go slower. And if that means you hike for 5 minutes and take a 30-second break, and then hike for 5 minutes and take a 30-second break all the way up Handies, that's what you do. And I've definitely done that with a friend of mine that I've paced up there. And that's part of the fun of hard rock. And then on the way down, hopefully, with each step you take on the way down, you feel better. But yeah, it's very rare when someone gets a serious altitude illness at hard rock. Very, very rare there. That was a very good question, though, Dean. I appreciate that question. Let's see here. Let me see. I had some more questions here. How is it different preparing for and racing a humid race like Vermont 100 versus a dry, hot race like Western States? That's excellent. 'Cause I've run Western a couple times. I've crewed and paced it 8 or 9 other times. And then now I live 15 minutes from the Vermont 100 course. I was going to run it this year, but it got canceled because of big floods we had here. So I wouldn't say I'm used to the humidity now, but I'm getting used to it, or it sucks less, maybe. It's a good way to say that. Even though dry and hot is really hot, it's much easier than wet and hot. Humidity takes the cake as far as really hard. Moving here from Colorado, I think it's way harder than altitude, dealing with the humidity. So for those of you that live in the humid parts of the U.S., good for you. You have I think you have a thumb up on people who live in the altitude as far as getting tougher. That's just me, though. Other people think differently. But how to prep for that? I mean, the best way to prep for any race, is if you can get there or train in similar conditions. And if you can't, for either one of these types of races, both of them are going to be hot. Vermont and Western States are both typically hot races, and if you can train either in hot and dry or hot and humid, that's great. But if when you're training it's still cool outside, you can definitely put layers on, layers and layers and layers of clothing. Ian likes to do that a lot. When I used to live in Central Oregon, it would be funny to watch him run around Bend with lots of clothes on in May because he was getting ready for Western States. But that's a good thing to do. It gets you used to running in the heat. It's heat acclimation, and it kind of like with hard rock, it helps you get used to suffering. And the same with Vermont. If you're just wearing more clothing when you're out running, again to get used to that heat. You can, for both of these, as far as indoor heat acclimation, for Western States, something like going into a dry sauna is great heat acclimation. And then for Vermont, I say I like a steam room. And steam rooms are super, super uncomfortable. So if you can get used to that, then you're on a good trajectory towards being comfortable at Vermont. I found it does take a lot longer to get comfortable in a steam room than it does a dry sauna. And so if you are going to go into a steam room, don't go in for super long. And you may, if like it's at a health club or your local rec center, and some of them have both steam room and sauna, maybe you can go back and forth between the two. The horrible one, the steam room, and then the mostly sucky but not quite as bad, going to the sauna then, because then you can still get the benefit of the heat, but it just won't be killing you like that steam room will. And then after a while, get back into the steam room. Yeah, thanks for that question. That's good. Just and really humid races like Vermont as well. It's good to have lots of changes of clothes and lots of anti-chafe lube, whether that's squirrel's nut butter or Body Glide or chamois cream. Take your pick. And change clothes. I'd say, I don't know if you have to head to toe, but maybe not a bad idea, head to toe at least once during the race, just to get all that chafy clothes off you and put some nice dry clothes on it for no other reason. It feels nice. Let's see. Oh, here we go, Dean. Another question. Any new coaching tips I've learned this year? Yeah, I just kind of was going over them about in living in Vermont now. And a lot of it involves chafing. I have to definitely lube up a lot more than I used to, like way more. It's crazy. I can't wear the same shorts 2 days in a row. They don't dry. We're in Colorado. You know, you can wear them for a 20 miler. They'd be dry in 30 minutes. That's not the case in Vermont. So I have to do laundry a lot more often, which is too bad. I think though, in Vermont, that is the biggest thing, is the humidity just makes everything so wet, and I go through way more squirrel's nut butter and chamois butter both, and I do drink more. I drink more water and electrolytes when I'm out running too, because I'm definitely sweating a lot. I mean, there's not many midsummer runs where I get done and my shirt's not just so all my clothes are just soaked. So I do find myself drinking more as well. Just get thirstier. Let's see. Thanks for that, Dean. Let's see, Matthew. Curious about your personal or coached pacing strategies for longer races. Let's say 50 to 100 miles. Do you like target certain splits, etc., or something else? That's an excellent question, Matthew. For longer races like that, especially early in the race, it's about effort, not a pace, an effort level. And I always tell people to start out have the talk test. If you can't talk, have an actual conversation in the early parts of a longer race, then you're going too hard. Now there might be a few small uphills here and there where maybe your heart rate goes up a little bit, but for the most part, you should be able to have a full conversation. And not that you necessarily are, because maybe there's no one around you, or maybe the people next to you don't want to hear you, or you don't want to talk to them, and that's fine. But if you were to have a conversation, would you be able to talk and converse, or would it be gasping and wheezing? If it's gasping and wheezing, then you're going way too hard. Because despite what Speed Goat says, 100 miles actually is far. And gasping and wheezing at mile 20 is going to make for a really, really long 80 miles if you're lucky to make it that far then. And so some people they like to use, if you're not comfortable with just how you feel and knowing it based on feels, and some people do like to use heart rate monitors, and that's great. If you know your heart rate zones to go off of, then by all means use a heart rate monitor. You want to stay in zone 2. Zone 2 all day long in those longer races. Zone 2, zone 2. And if you're feeling peppy in the last 10K, sure, go ahead and kick it in. But I wouldn't do that with 20 miles to go, because 20 miles is still a long ways to go. If you blow up 4 miles into that, that's a long 16 miles in. So you can maybe, bump up the effort a little bit, just incrementally every few miles if you're feeling good at mile 80. But I would say wait until about 5 miles to 10K out until you really kick it in. For most people, that's not really an option, 100 milers though, but for sometimes for people it is. So the effort, the talk test, and zone 2 if you go based on heart rate, and your zones. That was a great question, Matthew. Thank you. Let's see some other questions here. What's the best way to incorporate cross training to maximize running fitness, and how does this change with age? Just a second here. That is a great question. For most of the first 20 years of my ultra running, I was mainly just a runner. And I don't say just a runner, but as in I didn't do many other endurance sports. I would I used to bike a lot pre-ultras, and once I hit the ultras, I kind of forgot about my bikes. And then about 19, 18 years into ultras, then I remembered, oh yeah, my bikes. So I got those out and started riding them again. And that kind of coincided with me being like mid 40s, something like that. And I found that when I was, it pretty much did hit when I was mid 40s, I couldn't run the miles I used to run. It was just beating my body up too much. And so the cycling, and I think that's why I turned to my bikes then. And the cycling still helped me get in long endurance outside, but without the pounding on the body. And I got myself a gravel bike, and that's like the best thing I've ever bought as far as sports equipment. I love my gravel bike. It's taken me from coast to coast, literally. And yeah, you can. I mean, I really really look forward to like long days on the bike. It's so much fun just to get on and put some money in my pocket and ride out to some of those stereotypical Vermont country stores and get some creamies and whatever and be out for 5 to 7 hour days. And that doesn't translate like 1-to-1 for a running. That wouldn't be the same as a 5 to 7 hour run, not by any stretch. It's probably more like I'd be like a 3-ish hour run effort wise, because on bikes you can coast, and if you coast while you're running, you stop, and that's not the case when you're biking unless it's uphill. And so there's a lot more downtime on a bike, and that's one of the reasons why it's less hard on the body, but also you're not pounding. But yeah, I highly recommend cross training to any age, but especially more so if as you get older and you're just noticing that running is pounding your body more and you can't run the mileage you used to run, whatever that was, if it was high mileage or low mileage or any mileage, whatever that was. If you can rotate 1 to 2 days of cycling in a week for some to take the place of either an easy run, or if you have a back-to-back long run scheduled on a weekend, maybe one could be a long run and one could be a long bike. And I think that's an excellent way to do it. Excellent way to do back-to-back weekends, back-to-back long run weekends. Yeah, it's great question. Let's see if we have any others here. Another from Dean. How do races compare challenges on East Coast versus West Coast versus Colorado? That's a great question, Dean. East Coast, they're way more technical. They're just way more technical. Except for maybe like Squamish area where Gary Robbins is. His races are pretty technical. But the Northeast where I live in Vermont, the Green Mountains here and the Whites in New Hampshire, they're just super rocky, super rooty, wet, technical, steep. They're very steep. We don't have the altitude, but we have those things. That said, there are pockets of races like the Vermont 100 is definitely not a technically difficult race. That's mostly on dirt roads and a little bit of single track, but it's a pretty runnable course. That's why I was looking forward to running it this year. Same with the Vermont 50. It's a little bit tougher terrain-wise than the Vermont 100, but those are both very runnable courses. But kind of the stereotypical East Coast races, there are a lot. I mean, I guess I said there are a good number of non-technical, but percentage-wise, there are more technical races East Coast than there are West Coast and Colorado. And so like in Colorado, I consider a lot of them, especially in the San Juans where I was living, not necessarily too technical, but more just rugged, where, not super rocky and rooty, but just the terrain underfoot is still kind of pocky and definitely some rocks and boulders, but the ruggedness kind of can be made up from just the altitude as well. Just tough like that. And then West Coast, where I was living in Oregon, I mean, that was like butter. I love my Oregon trails around Sisters. If you, yeah, those were just nice and smooth, single track, nice rolling terrain, very fast, very cruisy, and that's just not as much here. There are some of that here, some of those here in Vermont, and definitely some in Colorado too. California, like around the Bay Area, like in Marin Headlands, that's very cruisy. Like Central Oregon too, it's hillier in the Marin Headlands, but underfoot, it's very much the same. Nice buttery single track. But I don't hate the super technical stuff as much as I did when I moved here, but I found my mountains where I like to hike, or well, that basically are hiking, and then I found the trails where I can run, and it's a good combination. So I appreciate that. See, Kristen's a northeasterner from Connecticut. There, what are some of my favorite races? Oh, that's a good question. Let me see. Just in general, I love Bighorn. Bighorn is in Wyoming. It's in north central Wyoming, around near Sheridan, and I love it because they have four different distances: a 30K, 50K, 50 mile, 100 mile, and three of them are point to point. The 100 miles out and back, and just the big community there is awesome. They do such a good job putting it on. They stagger the start times of the races, so people from the different distances finish together. And that's kind of cool. You could be struggling in from the 100 miler, running near or walking near a 30K, and that's pretty cool. I appreciate how they do that. And some of the remote aid stations, they're tended to by cowboys who aren't runners at all, like not at all, but they just know how to take care of people, and I think that's pretty cool. They load up their horses and other pack animals, pack in however many miles it is out to the aid station, and they get a fire going, get some bacon frying, and a couple miles out, you're like, what's that smell? That smells like bacon, and in 15 minutes, there you go. You've got some bacon from a super nice cowboy who's never run a mile in his life, but he knows how to take care of people, and that's what he's doing, and that's what I love about Bighorn. Other ones, Hellgate 100K in Virginia. That's a Horton race. That's a very, very special race. Where's Waldo? Although now it's just Waldo, but I used to run it with Where's Waldo, so that's what it was. 100K in Oregon. That's another very special race. I love that one. JFK 50 miler in Maryland. It's another great classic. So let me see some shorter races. Kennebec Mountain Run 15 miler in Durango. That gets a big nod for there. Bloomsday 12K in Spokane, Washington. That's my hometown race. That was my first race in 1983. Love that one. Yeah, say those are some of my faves. Copper Canyon Ultra in Uruguay. That's a great one too. Just the history behind that one now. Thanks, Kristen. Let me see here. Gonna go through. What would you recommend for someone's first 100-mile races? Hang on just a second here. I would recommend someone finds a 100-mile race that excites them. Whether that means a flatter, faster, or easier, I think that's a better way to say that. Less technical, doesn't have extremes, something like, if that's what's gonna excite them more, then that's a great first 100. If and some of those examples, I guess, would be like Umstead or Tunnel Hill or Brazos, Yeti, Badger, any of those that are on rail trails, basically, or rail trail type terrain. If something mountainous is, excites someone, they come from like a big backpacking and mountaineering background. Maybe they're more excited for a mountainous one, something like Bighorn. That was my first 100, and I loved it. It beat me up, but I loved it. It was an awesome first 100 miler. I have very fond memories of that race. Western States could be a great first 100 miler. Obviously has a lot of history behind it, and it would be very easy for anyone who's running Western to get a crew, because which of their friends doesn't want to go to Western and just to be part of it. Vermont, that's a nice in-betweener between super mountainous and flat, because it's still got like 17,000 feet of vert for mostly being on roads, which is pretty good for a mostly road race. Has more vert than Leadville. Of course, the high point's only like 2,000 feet, or maybe not high, maybe 1,800. But yeah, I would say though, Dean, the biggest thing is whatever type of terrain excites someone, because that's what's gonna get them out training, and then they're going to be excited for the race. If they're excited for a mountainous race, but an easier one on a rail trail, that may not be exciting for them. So they're just not going to be as motivated to train, and that will kind of and then maybe when they finish, they'll be like, eh. And then but if they do something that they're actually really excited for, that's going to be the best first one, I think. So. Not a super specific answer there, but I'm sticking with it. Let's see here. Got quite a few questions here. Matthew, following up on the pacing strategy when using effort or heart rate. As a guide, how do you best compensate for races with varying terrain? Example: zone 2 on uphill or flat might work super well. But that same zone 2 effort on downhill might be really fast. Thanks. I don't think if you've trained appropriately in zone 2, then that shouldn't be too fast on the downhills. Zone 2 for most people, that should be your all day effort. Zone 2, that should be all day right there. And hopefully if you put in the training and that means long runs and long training races in zone 2 that have lots of uphill and downhill, then you should have been running those downhills and training in zone 2 as well, and that gets you that's what will get you ready for that. You may do say you're training for a 100-miler and you do a 50-miler that has significant downhill. Hopefully you're doing those downhills in zone 2. And yeah, that might be 8-minute pace, but if you're not extending your effort, that's not going to beat you up. Your legs might get beat up, but in the training race, that's okay. That's the point. One of the points of training races is to beat your legs up on those long downhills. So then, when it comes to your goal race, your legs are already seasoned and they're ready for those long downhills and that faster pace going down them. But effort-wise, that shouldn't be an issue. Just shouldn't be. That's a good question. Ken, hey Ken, all day, buddy. Any go-to tips on stomach issues during hard efforts? Yeah, hang on a second. Usually slow down. That's usually a big. That's usually the biggest issue why people have stomach issues is they're going too hard, and then dehydration can exacerbate that. And if you're going too hard, you're going to be sweating more, and that will dehydrate you even quicker. Trying different or new foods can blow someone's stomach up too. But yeah, I don't think that's really what you're asking. Yeah, it's so yeah, during stomach issues during hard efforts, I think if you want to work up to that, you need to take it at baby steps then, and that's by doing short hard repeats and then moving those up to medium distance hard repeats, then longer hard repeats, then just keep going up and up, and longer tempo runs too. And when you're doing those types of things, because you're probably doing these to train for an ultra, be my guess, Ken, and to get used to eating while you're running hard too, because you're going to need to eat while you're running harder in races, and to get your stomach used to that. Although it's in races, it is best to try and put in calories when you're not putting out the big efforts, like on a really hard uphill. If your effort's really high, that's not a good time to eat because your heart rate's going to be really high, and so that's going to be really hard to digest food. It's going to be easier to digest on the flats and downs. So even though you're going faster, your heart rate's probably going to be a little bit lower, and so it's easier to eat, and then your stomach should probably help digest those foods a little bit better. Good question there, Ken. Thanks, buddy. Let's see here. We have some more questions. Is it worth running short races in the build-up to ultras, and how could these help? Yes, absolutely it is. And so by short races, I'm thinking sub marathon or sub 50K. Yeah, absolutely. One of my favorite race distances for ultra runners is the half marathon, specifically the road half marathon, because it's a really, really good long tempo run. And ultra runners don't do, most ultra runners I think don't do enough of those. And in doing it on the road or an easy trail, that takes any technicality out of the way as far as rocks and roots. And most roads aren't going to be super hilly. Of course, you can find some hilly half marathons, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. But more so just being on the nice surface, and that helps you get into a good zone on being able to push your lactate threshold up higher, so you can push harder for longer, and then that makes it, when you come back to your ultras, makes the ultra pace be much easier. Another bonus of running shorter, faster road races, usually when we're running faster, we run more efficiently, we run with better form, and when you do that often enough, then that will hopefully trickle down into your ultra runs, and so you'll run more efficiently longer, until you eventually are reduced to the ultra shuffle at whatever mile it is. Just when fatigue sets in, sometimes fatigue just sets in. But yeah, one thing that running those shorter races can help make that later in the race. But also another big thing that can help make that later in the race is strength work. Go to the gym and either hire a personal trainer, or just talk to one of the personal trainers there and ask them for a simple strength routine for runners. Or you can find how many hundreds of them online. And if you can do that a couple days a week, and sometimes you can just do these things even at home, then that will help just make all your tendons and ligaments stronger, and then keeping your form better longer into the race, just keep you more efficient. And then the longer you can do that, the better your race is going to be, and less likely to crash and burn. Question there. Let's see. What else do we have here? Oops. Let me see. What's my preferred race distance, both for my own racing and for training runners? Well, I touched a little bit about that on the half marathon. Specifically, I said road half marathons. Personally, I love road half marathons, and it was through my love of road half marathons that I figured out that they're a really good training race for ultra runners. Just throwing them in there, and when I introduce those to some ultra runners, they don't understand why. Then once they do them, they're like, "Oh, yeah, that helps a lot." And I think a lot of people, if they come to ultras more from a road running background, when they were training for half marathons before, it was a lot harder to run the half marathon because that's what they were peaking at. But now they're peaking up here. So then getting onto a road and running a trail half or running a road half marathon where it's just down here, those 13 miles go by really fast. And they, it doesn't shoot your whole day. You do it, and it's just a good hard, 13-mile day, and then you get on with your day. And as far as preferred race distance for me, that's a big one. And for training runners, I like it both for myself and training people. I love diversity. Whether that's people running 5Ks, 10Ks, half marathons, 50Ks, 50 mile, 40 mile, 100K, 100 mile. The more you can put diversity in both your training and racing, the longer you'll probably be a runner because you're less likely to just get into the same routine of doing the same thing over and over and over and over and over again every day, every week, every month, every year. And not only does that probably get boring, you're more likely to get overuse injuries if you're just doing the same thing over and over and over again. With putting some variety in it, it will change things up for your body. Say you've been running a block of ultras for the last 6 months, then after a good rest and recovery period, I'm a big fan of doing like a 8-week block of training for a 10K or a half marathon. And that's really fun to get that leg speed up, and then when you do go back into the ultras, your leg speed's a lot better. Or reverse that for clients that I train more for 5K, 10K half marathons. After they've been doing that for a while, I like encouraging them to maybe jump up to a marathon or 50K. And then after doing like a 3 to 4 month block of that and then doing the race, they're much stronger when they come back to their shorter races. And then that helps them get faster. Just that big base of strength that they used in their marathon and 50K training translates into a nice, really, really nice base to springboard off of for faster speed work then. Good question there. Let's see. Ian says we have for strength training. Yeah, you can get a hold of Renee Mativier. You can find her through the Sharman Ultra website. She's a personal trainer and professional runner that lives in Bend, and she can absolutely get on the phone with you or a Zoom call and help tailor something to you if you don't feel comfortable going to your local gym and finding that person too, or if that's just not available to you. Because I know not everyone lives near a gym. Let's see here. See if we have any other ones I can touch on here. Here we go. As a race director, what makes a race well organized, and what things should runners look out for before signing up? That's a really good question. I've been a race director for over 20 years, and I don't want to say don't run new races, because new races can turn into really awesome races. But I do think I think it's important that races have a runner as their race director, not just an event organizer who is only about the marketing, but actually is a runner and gets runners and gets running and gets races and knows, has their own idea on what should be at a race, what shouldn't be at a race, those types of things. It's very easy for me to tell just by looking at at race websites what races are run by runners and which ones are run by marketing companies that just want to make a lot of money, because there's a difference in both of those, and they can both be low key, and they can both be super high octane, high key. So just because one is super low key doesn't mean it's not run by just a mass marketing corporation. But yeah, I think that's a good stuff to look for there. But yeah, the asking questions, see if it is an actual runner who is, or and I guess it doesn't have to be just someone familiar with running, like if you're like a spouse of a runner, something like that, who's in the know on running. I think that would make that's what makes for a good race director. And let's see what else here. I don't know. That looks like that may wrap it up, unless anyone else in the chat has any more questions for me. Again, tomorrow at the same time, 1 Pacific, 4 Eastern, we have Annie Hughes. She'll be doing her Facebook Live question and answer. So tune into her if you want to probably hear about some 200 milers, since she is our resident expert on those. And if you have any more questions for me, please feel free to put them on the page here, and I'm happy to respond back there, or I can send you a Facebook private message, either one. And other than that, I think we might be about done. I thank you all for joining in today, and happy holidays.